Let's start the show. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience and have continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 6 seasons. Let's make it 7 in 2020. But enough of me. I'm here for you on today's episode of the FB Show. We're continuing our All-32 NFL team preview series, taking a look at every NFL team through the lens of fantasy football. Up next, after this video, we're only gonna have 10 more to do, baby. We are going to continue our AFC East previews with the Buffalo Bills, a team that a lot of people are expecting to win the AFC East this season. But before we get started with that, a few quick things from you. First off, smash that subscribe button, power running back style so that you never miss a video. Secondly, hit that like button down below like an open receiver downfield, Patrick Mahomes style. And last but not least, you can follow me on all social media platforms at FF Vulture, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We got a whole lot of different content cooking on all 3 of those platforms. I'm ready to go. Let's just jump right in. Josh Allen, quarterback of the Buffalo Bills. In 2019, he finished as quarterback 6 overall. Really just came on strong to the fantasy world, the fantasy football community, whatever word you want to use for it. He really just made his presence felt in this game. 7 games as a quarterback 1, 7 games as a quarterback 2, 1 game as a quarterback 3. And here's the thing that's really interesting to note because this is what I'm going to say, right? Josh Allen was very good for your fantasy team last season. And you're probably wondering, Mike, how can you say that? He basically had the exact same performances as Russell Wilson did last season too. If you remember in my Russell Wilson preview, I said he had 7 games as a 1. I think he had 6 games as a 2. And I said Russell Wilson killed your fantasy team. Here's the difference. Josh Allen's number 2 finishes, his quarterback 2 finishes, were all fringe 1. They were all on the fringe of that quarterback 1 range. 16, 16, 13, 14, 13, and 17. So of those, he really only hurt you maybe once or twice, but everything else was on the fringe of being a quarterback 1 week, and that's really like what you're looking for. You're looking for guys who are going to consistently put up those QB1 numbers for you. He had 271 completions on 461 pass attempts, over 3,000 yards. The big story here is 510 rushing yards, 29 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. 18.6 points per game on 16 games played. His new finish is going to be quarterback 11. So yes, he does slide down a bit, but he still is in that quarterback 1 territory. The story here, though, becomes the ADP. QB 8, 707. I have him ranked as quarterback 9. I understand how good Josh Allen is. And by that, I mean, I know he's going to give you weeks, right? He's going to give you weeks where he just booms, he goes off, he gives you great numbers. I just don't know what those weeks look. I just don't know what those weeks look like. The reason why Josh Allen is a good fantasy quarterback is simply because of rushing upside. This is the team that wants to run the ball first. They want to play great defense, and they're not going to let Josh Allen throw the ball 550 times a year. I mean, he threw 460 attempts, and I believe that was outside the top 20 in, I believe that was outside the top 20 in attempts. Where was he? He was 21. He was behind Gardner Minshew, Jimmy G, Kyle Allen, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Derek Carr, Mitch Trubisky. Like, all those players, those are players that we don't normally consider as great fantasy quarterbacks. They all threw more attempts than Josh Allen. So I don't know what the ceiling for him could actually be. Like, if they give him the volume, like, he's probably closer to top 5, right? But they aren't. And this is the team that just signed McDermott to an extension, so they believe in what he's doing. And this team is going to rely on that run-first offense, limiting Allen in that way just because there are a few concerns about his passing development. And then they're just going to play stout defense every single week. They have one of the best defenses in the NFL. So I've ranked as quarterback 9, one spot below ADP. And I guess the question becomes, who are you taking Josh Allen over? Who are you excited to grab Josh Allen over? When are you like, yes, I got Josh Allen, right? So for me, Josh Allen or Russell Wilson? Russell Wilson. Josh Allen or Matt Ryan? Matt Ryan. Josh Allen or Drew Brees? Drew Brees. Carson Wentz or Josh Allen? I think that's a great question. Aaron Rodgers or Josh Allen? I think you lean I think you lean Allen there. I think you lean Allen just based off of rushing upside. The thing about Allen is, there's been a lot of comparisons between him and Cam Newton, and I think they are valid to a certain, I guess to a larger extent, like the famous quote that I love using, and I'm stealing this from Bomani Jones, is Jaheim Allen, because if Josh Allen were black, we'd be talking about him very, very differently than if he were white. And just he literally might be the white version of Cam Newton, right? And I guess that's the thing that we really have to rationalize here, because I was not a big Josh Allen fan coming into his NFL career. So if we are looking at the white version of Cam Newton, Cam Newton's been a top 5 quarterback every single season he's been healthy. Cam Newton's nickname is the Fantasy King, just because of how consistently great he has been. So we kind of have to give Josh Allen that same respect, right? Right? I'm gonna pull up Josh Allen's career stats in a second. Let's do this right now. All right, so we got Josh Allen's career stats. Let's go Cam Newton stats. Okay, let's pull up 2 different tabs right here. Give me a sec. We're just gonna do this on the fly, because now I'm really interested in what these things actually look like. All right. So let's just take completions, or I guess pass attempts. All right. So last season, for Allen, 461 attempts. Cam Newton has had over that in every single year he's been healthy. Even if he's missed a few games, he's still been able to put up that more pass attempts than Josh Allen has. In terms of completions, let's see, completions 271. Same thing. So Cam Newton appears to be a better passer than Josh Allen. And you look at this again, Allen barely eclipsed 3,000 yards. Cam has eclipsed 3,000 yards in every single season besides last season where he played 2 games. As much as the comparisons are there, I think Josh Allen is more so Cam Newton light than Cam Newton. What are the rushing totals? Let's go yards and rushing. Right, so for Josh Allen, 630 rushing yards his rookie season, 510 last year. And those are actually pretty comparable to Cam. Cam pretty much averages. Can I get an average on that? Cam pretty much averages, if I'm just ballparking the numbers, he pretty much averages, it's roughly 600 rushing yards a year. So Josh Allen's he's in the range. It's in the range of outcome. He's done it once before, and he was also 100 yards below that as well this past season. I don't really know what to do with Josh Allen when it comes to fantasy. Would you rather have Josh Allen or Carson Wentz? That's the interesting question for me right now. Just because Wentz is a guy that I like. I like the offense. I do think he also provides somewhat of a rushing upside there as well, and I think he has a better arm talent. But Josh Allen has also been able to do this now essentially for 2 seasons. I forget where he finished last season. Let's pull this up right now. Let's see. In 2018, he was quarterback 21. Right, so we really only have 1 season of Josh Allen being a very good fantasy quarterback. I think that's the big thing. I just don't know what to do with Allen. I think there are other quarterbacks that I'd rather have in that range, because I do know what the ceilings and floor are for those guys, and I'm just not comfortable with Josh Allen in this offense. I see why you would take him, especially with that rushing upside, and I'm not off of him by any means. I'm just confused. I'm just going through it in my head, right? So he has Singletary out of the backfield. He has Stefon Diggs now. He has John Brown, Cole Beasley still there, Dawson Knox. So this team does have talent. I just don't think the system matches the talent. I think that's the best way to put it, and that's going to limit Josh Allen for me in that way. Now let's talk about Devin Singletary, second-year running back for the Buffalo Bills. In 2019, finished as running back 31 in standard, running back 31 in PPR. 151 carries, 29 receptions, 775 rushing yards, 194 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. He did miss a few games due to a hamstring injury. 11.3 points per game. His new finish is running back 25. Devin Singletary was pretty solid during his rookie season. He had 2 games as a running back 1, 5 games as a 2, and 3 games as a running back 3. So it was a little bit up and down in that way, but I do feel like that Devin Singletary provided you a level of consistency when he was on the field. You were able to start him week in and week out. And while he might not be a number 1 running back for you, I do think he's really good as a number 2 option. If you load up heavily at wide receiver during the first half of your draft, having Singletary as your running back 2 or your flex is really intriguing to me, especially in a PPR format because he is a very good pass catcher. His ADP is currently running back 19 going at 310, and that kind of concerns me because I do feel like that is a bit of a high price to pay for him. I have him ranked as running back 25. It's nothing against Singletary by any means. I've said this time and time again. There are a lot of good running backs in the NFL. Like, who are you taking Devin Singletary over? Who are you confidently, should I say, taking Devin Singletary over? Are you taking David Montgomery or Devin Singletary? That's an interesting question. Raheem Mostert or Singletary? That's an interesting question. Jonathan Taylor or Devin Singletary? That's an interesting question. But like Fournette, Ingram, Connor, Gordon, Bell, Johnson, Carson, Chubb, Eckler. You're taking all of those guys over Devin Singletary, I think. So he is kind of just chilling there on my rankings. He kind of represents this tier gap between starting NFL running back and timeshare guys. I guess not even that. Primary carriers and then timeshare guys. That's the better way to put it. Because with the addition of Zack Moss, who we're going to talk about in a bit, I do think Singletary's role and his opportunity in this offense is going to change. I'm in on Singletary, just not at that draft price. I think it is just a little bit too steep. But if you can get him in that 4th or 5th round, if he does fall, I do think he's an excellent candidate. 11 points per game just in his rookie season alone. They were giving him the ball once they kind of shifted him to the focal point of the offense instead of Frank Gore, who did see quite a few touches during the early parts of last season. But once they unleashed Devin Singletary, he was pretty solid for your fantasy team. I expect him to kind of stay along that same trend. I don't know if the jump happens this year. I'm expecting it more so in year 3. But this is a team that does want to run the football, and Devin Singletary is going to see quite a bit of opportunity. So if you are able to scoop him up as your running back 2 or running back 3, I'm here for it. I just don't know if I'd have him over some of the other guys who would be available, and that's really my only concern. And let's go over to the other running back in this backfield now, and that is rookie Zack Moss out of Utah, drafted in the 3rd round by the Bills at 322. His player comparison for me is Melvin Gordon, and that may be a high bar, but when I watch Zack Moss play, it reminds me very much of Melvin Gordon's play style. In 2019, he had 235 carries, 28 receptions, and here's the thing that I think he's actually better at than Melvin Gordon, and that's just pass catching. Those 28 receptions came on 29 targets, so he only had 1 drop, or it was just an errant throw by the quarterback. 1,400 rushing yards, 388 receiving yards, and 17 touchdowns. He's just a guy that's going to just kind of ground and pound you. Also can do some work in the receiving game and score. Like, that's the big thing. Like, he just gets into the end zone. He's only 5'9", so he's a smaller running back, 223, and he runs a 4.65. So, like, that speed score is really interesting because he doesn't rely on speed when you watch him play. Instead, he more so relies on cuts and then just breaking tackles. And I think that's where you're going to see the value of Zack Moss this season, because he's not going to be a guy that really just explodes off the page with his speed. But what's really impressive is that fact that he'll make the first guy miss and then break a tackle. Now, can he do that at the NFL where the guys are bigger, faster, stronger than the competition he was facing at Utah? I don't know. I'm expecting him to. I'm really excited about the prospect of Zack Moss. And I think here's the question. The question becomes, what does this backfield look like going forward? Because it's not like they spent a 5th or a 4th round pick on Zack Moss. They spent a 3rd rounder. And like that's not incredible draft capital by any means, but that is just something to consider. Frank Gore is gone. Do they just give Zack Moss the goal line work? Is he just a guy that they use sporadically throughout from 10 to 10? Is this Devin Singletary's backfield? I don't know. I don't know what this backfield shakes out to look like. But I think I like Zack Moss, the talent, more than I like Devin Singletary, the talent. And that has me also concerned, and that's why I have Singletary, as I said, right kind of in that tier between primary running back and timeshare running back. He's like the last guy in that group before you start getting into Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers, Sony Michel, DeAndre Swift, Kareem Hunt, Jordan Howard, Ronald Jones, Tevin Coleman. I'm interested in Zack Moss, where he's going. He's being drafted as running back 50 at 1303. I have him ranked as running back 47, so there's not a huge gap there. But if they give this guy the goal line work, he's going to be valuable, because Buffalo, for whatever, despite Buffalo's lack of passing volume, they do manage to score points, and that is an interesting dynamic as well. But then if they just give him the goal line work in general, he's gonna have some value there. He might become the vulture mascot of the channel. There's a very real possibility of that. But then even so, if this offense goes back to what we saw in the beginning of the season, where it was Frank Gore getting 15 carries a game, and they have Zack Moss in that role, he's gonna be incredibly valuable, and he'll be a steal in your fantasy draft. It's just a matter of how they see the fit for Zack Moss. And they've already compared him to Frank Gore. Some of the coaches have during some press conferences, especially after the draft. But what version of Frank Gore then are we getting? Are we getting the guy who's going to get the ball 14 times a game throughout the game, or are we just getting the goal line version of Frank Gore, which we saw towards the end of the season? I'm not sure. I'm willing to take the risk in the 13th round. In Dynasty, he's a guy that I'm really fascinated by. I'm considering him with my 2nd round pick. If he's still on the board, there's a lot of intrigue surrounding Zack Moss. I just don't know what his utility is going to look like. And maybe it's just a thing where it cuts into Singletary's value as well. Maybe neither of these guys prove to be just a stand-up fantasy star just because they are constantly eating into each other's value. These are all questions that you have to ask yourself. I've said this before. Specifically with wide receivers, and I'm more so leaning on it with this backfield as well, where I'll just take the guy who's going way later if I don't know what the situation fully looks like. I've said this kind of about, I'll talk about this with Miami's backfield as well, but if I don't know what Singletary's outlook is fully going to be this season because of Zack Moss, and I don't know what role Zack Moss is going to play, I'll just take the guy who goes later in draft, and that's clearly going to be Zack Moss. I can use that 3rd round pick at Singletary's ADP elsewhere, and then just take the backup, the handcuff, not even the handcuff, but the guy who may come in and see more opportunity than we expect in Zack Moss going in the 13th round. It just seems like a really good value to me. Finally, let's wrap this thing up with the receiving corps of the Buffalo Bills. And we're going to start off with Stefon Diggs, who was traded to the Bills this offseason. If you remember, a year ago, the Bills traded for Antonio Brown, and that trade fell through. And now here they are a year later, and they wind up with Stefon Diggs. Diggs in 2019 came in as wide receiver 18 in standard, wide receiver 21 in PPR, 3 games as a wide receiver 1, 3 games as a 2, and 1 game as a 3. Stefon Diggs was interesting last season. That's the only way to put it. He was quite the case. He basically disappeared during the first 5 weeks of the season. If you remember that, you drafted Stefon Diggs in the 3rd round last year, maybe even the 2nd, and he just tanked your first 5 weeks. He finished outside of the top 36 in 4 of those games. He came in as running back 21 during week 4. And then he kind of found some resurgence. Week 6 and 7 was a wide receiver 1, a wide receiver 15 in week 8. And then he kind of fell off the map just a little bit again. Came back at wide receiver 5 in week 11, and then pretty much disappeared throughout the rest of the season. So what are you getting with Stefon Diggs now in Buffalo? Because the big thing last season with Diggs was that Kirk Cousins just wasn't throwing him the ball as much as he has previously, or if he was, the balls were a bit off target. 94 targets last year, 63 catches, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm probably going to make a video on this, and it might have already been out by the time that I'm recording this. How you score your fantasy points is more important than how many fantasy points you score. It's the same thing with Amari Cooper. It's the same thing with Russell Wilson. And it's the same thing with guys like A.J. Brown. Yes, they are going to win you weeks. But what happens when you start them in the other weeks? Like, are you going to be happy? Are you going to be satisfied? With Stefon Diggs, I don't know. I'm very, Diggs is one of my favorite NFL receivers. But I'm terrified for him, especially this season, coming into this weird offseason with a new team, with a new quarterback, and that quarterback being Josh Allen. Yes, he can throw deep, but he's not that accurate of a deep ball thrower. I don't know what to do with Diggs. I'm staying away. His ADP is currently wide receiver 19, going at 409. I have him ranked as wide receiver 27. This is a low passing volume to begin with, and for all the other reasons that I just said, I'm kind of out on Diggs. If I can get him as my 3rd or 4th wide receiver, probably a bit happier there. But at wide receiver 19, that's just scary territory for me to be drafting Stefon Diggs this season. I have him ranked behind, let's see. I have Diggs, let's pull up, come on. All right, I have Diggs behind A.J. Green, Devontae Parker, McLaurin, T.Y. Hilton, Metcalf, Chark, Lockett. I have Diggs ahead of Keenan Allen, Jarvis Landry, Marquise Brown, Julian Edelman, Marvin Jones, Tyler Boyd. So I hope that that just kind of gives you some context as to where I have Diggs. I'm just concerned. I just have a lot of questions, and I don't need those kind of weekly finishes week in and week out from my number 2 wide receiver. If I'm getting, I guess here's the caveat, right? If I go Julio Jones in the back of the 1st round, my 2nd round pick is then a running back. So let's say I start off, Julio, Josh Jacobs. I then use my 4th round pick on, I get my 3rd round pick rather, my 3rd round pick on, Le'Veon Bell. And then I take Stefon Diggs. I think that's interesting because Jacobs and Bell, they're going to give me a consistent floor at the running back position. And I know Julio is going to give me 100 receiving yards every single week and 6 catches. So that provides me some flexibility to have Stefon Diggs as my wide receiver 2 if I have to. But ultimately, that's kind of the only scenario where I see myself drafting Diggs comfortably and where I'm excited to draft him because I then have the flexibility for him to tank some weeks because I know what I'm getting from my other players week in and week out. And we're going to wrap this thing up with John Brown. I don't know if his name's Jonathan, probably. Another Bills wide receiver. Now, they also have some guys like Cole Beasley and Dawson Knox at tight end. But honestly, just because of this passing volume and you are adding in such a talented receiver in Stefon Diggs, I don't think there's a point in talking about Beasley or Knox. I think Knox is kind of dead now, unfortunately, because he was a guy that I really liked coming into the season. But John Brown in 2019 really showed up, and he was really great to see because John Brown is one of the more talented guys in the NFL. I think he's one of the more underrated receivers personally. He was really good in Arizona. I believe he had some injury issues, concussion-wise. And now here we are in Buffalo, and he just really proved himself to be a great wide receiver. So in 2019, he finished as wide receiver 19 in standard, wide receiver 20 in PPR, 3 games as a 1, 1 game as a 2, and 8 games as a 3. 115 targets, 72 catches, 1,000 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. 12.3 points per game on 15 games played, a new finish of wide receiver 22. Jonathan Brown. Why do I keep calling him? We're rolling with it. Jonathan Brown. That's his new name. Jonathan Brown was quite the case for fantasy football last season. He continuously was really consistent inside the top 36, and it was just one of those things where you were guaranteed essentially 60 receiving yards a game. If you got the touchdown upside, like, you loved it, but you were pretty much just you were basically starting him for a consistent floor more than anything else. And that's why you see 8 games as a wide receiver 3. So in total, he had 12 of his 15 games inside the top 36, and that's great because he's not going to cost you a lot, and he's going to be a guy who you can start as a flex option week in and week out, and you're going to get top 36 you're going to get potential inside the top 36 more times than not. His ADP is wide receiver 43, going at 906. I have him ranked as wide receiver 42, and that's more so just because of the fact that Diggs is there. I don't know what John Brown's value is going to be this season because this low passing volume, Diggs is going to come in. Diggs is going to see 100 targets. So how many does that leave for John Brown, who was the number 1 option in Buffalo last season? I don't know. I'm willing to take the gamble on him because he is going in that 9th round. So guys that I have around him are, let's see. So guys that I have around John Brown are Jamison Crowder, who I talked about in the last episode. I love Jamison Crowder this year, so he's an easy candidate over him. And then behind him, I have N'Keal Harry, Alan Lazard, Sterling Shepard, Emmanuel Sanders, Anthony Miller. So just a lot of number 2 options on each team, but I'm going to take the shot on Brown because John Brown already has that chemistry with Josh Allen, kind of became the safety blanket for him last season. And if this offense does take the step forward with the addition of Zack Moss, a healthy Devin Singletary, and Stefon Diggs, I think that there is room for John Brown to be successful in fantasy football this season, and that draft price is perfect for a guy that you should be able to start in and week out at the flex at the bare minimum. But I think that's going to do it for our Buffalo Bills All-32 team preview. My voice is absolutely shot right now. I need to go take a break. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. We're trying to do this every single day, Monday through Friday, essentially, as we wrap these things up. We now have 10 left to do. I can't believe it. It's been quite the ride. So once again, thank you so much for watching. Follow me on all social media platforms at FFVulture on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And with that, I'll see you next time. Remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever. Later.